Welcome to a joint podcast session with my buddy, my business bestie, Brooke Richie-Babbage, and me, Rhea
It
Wong.
is the Rhea and Brooke or Brooke and Rhea show. Hi, everyone.
This is going to be super duper fun.
We're joining forces for the next few episodes, actually, this one and a couple more for a few reasons. As most of you guys listening know, Rhea and I both work with organizations that are trying to grow. And they're trying to grow in a way that doesn't mess them up for life, right? That is sustainable, that doesn't lead to burnout. And we both do that in our own spaces. And a lot of our conversations recently, there have been these two themes that just keep coming up: feeling stuck and feeling overwhelmed.
Let me talk about being stuck because, Brooke, as former EDs or recovering EDs, as I'd like to say, you and I have both been there, right? And the feeling stuck is I'm going at 100 miles an hour. I'm throwing everything at the wall, everything in the kitchen sink, but don't feel like I'm moving forward. And everything just feels super erratic, right? Sometimes I'm flush and sometimes I'm worried about payroll. It's feast or famine. It never just feels like I got.
There were definitely times in my organizational growth, and I know you and I have talked about this just in our lives and on this podcast, where that sense of being stuck, not knowing what to do next, is just overwhelming, which is the second thing we hear a lot of. And this word is just in the zeitgeist. It's hard to be an executive director and not at some point feel overwhelmed. But when you look around and that sense of overwhelm is like crushing, that version of being an ED where you want to grow your organization, you want to figure out who to hire next, you want to actually work in a productive way with your board, but you're stuck in the weeds. You have no time to think or vision or plan. It's like the tyranny of the urgent I talk about, right? You're putting out all of these fires. And so you can't actually figure out the best way forward. And these two ideas, they're linked, right? Feeling stuck, feeling overwhelmed. And Rhea and I have experienced them. We have navigated them, and we talk with the folks that we coach about them all the time. We wanted to talk about them together on the show. The second reason is that we have actually brought our superpowers together and combined our decades of experience to help leaders really do this work better, get unstuck, grow their organizations, raise real money, 7-figure money, unrestricted money to fund their incredible mission and work. And we've joined forces on an incredible program that many of you have actually heard of. Some of you have participated in Fund Your Strategic Vision. And while we were working on the program and talking with folks, including many of you who've gone through it, this question of, okay, we get it, how to get unstuck, how to not feel overwhelmed, but actually, what's the secret? It's great, we can talk about it, but like, actually, what do you do? It felt like all these, I don't know, messages from the universe, right, Rhea?
Yeah, to your point, when I was a little baby ED, I would have paid any amount of money to have someone like you, Brooke, show me the way, because I feel like so much of my ED career was just like figuring it out as I went. But there is a framework. There are people who've done it before. You don't have to make the same mistakes. And so I just think your superpower and my superpower complement so beautifully together, which is why when we created the Fund Your Strategic Vision, it was like the best of both worlds. Like, I am super into fundraising and relationship building and how you raise those unrestricted dollars. And you are just such a genius at organizational development and strategy and processes that it was like peanut butter and jelly. That is what we are bringing to the people. Give the people what they want. It's about getting unstuck.
This is episode 1 in our little mini series. And we want to kick off by talking about what we both agree is just the most foundational secret of them all, of sort of non-painful growth. And that is mindset. And I just want everybody listening to hear this. I'm going to put a flag in the stake in the ground and say that mindset work is not an afterthought, right? It's not like a nice to have when you're trying to run an organization in a way that does not lead to burnout. It's an absolute must. It cannot be skipped over. Your mindset, what you bring to the table as an executive director, the narratives in your head, what you're telling yourself about who you are and how you want to show up and what's hard and what's not, all of that is the foundation for everything else. It's the lens through which you see everything. And so that's why we're starting with mindset. It's going to, if we're talking about growth, help you see which strategies you need to let go of because they're no longer serving you, even if perhaps they got you to where you are. It's going to help you let go of the in the weeds activities that feel more productive because you're crossing things off your list, but actually are not the high leverage. And those of you who listen to my podcast have heard me talk a lot about high leverage, letting go of the low leverage and stepping into the high leverage. And it's going to let you show up differently in conversations with key stakeholders, hold your space and hold your power and hold your own in different ways, which I know Rhea is going to talk a lot about in the money mindset part.
Yeah, I like to talk about that BDE, Brooke. Big donor energy.
Yes, I love it.
You and I have been talking recently about this book that just came out, 10X is easier than 2X. And the thing that strikes me about 10X being easier than 2X, to your point about leverage, in order to take it to the next level, in order to take it to the 10X, you actually have to be a substantively different person. Like you have to lead differently. You have to think differently about money. It's not just like 2X doing more stuff harder and hustling harder. You literally have to think about the work differently. You have to carry yourself differently and you have to ask differently. There are two aspects of mindset.
They're qualitative shifts, not quantitative shifts. They're shifts.
That's right.
I love that.
Yeah. There are two aspects of mindset that we're going to talk about today. The first is money mindset, which for anyone who's listened to my podcast for any length of time knows that I will talk about money mindset until the cows come home. And the second is leadership mindset, which Brooke, you are such a beautiful master at. Let's take it from the top. Let's talk about money mindset.
Let's start at the beginning. Actually, what I'd love to try is like little mini interview here because we talk about zone of genius, we talk about areas of expertise, all of the different ways of saying that somebody knows their shit. This is Rhea's shit.
That's not shit.
Money mindset.
Yeah.
That's right. I want to hear from you. I just want to sort of dive in and go deep from the beginning. First of all, when you say money mindset, what are you talking about? What do you mean by money mindset?
Such a good question. A little bit later, I know we're going to talk about the notion of abundance. It's really, it's coming from a place of abundance. It is substantively shifting the narrative in your head. Let me just back up a second. The reason why we think that we believe certain things is just, it's a thing that we think again and again. And if we think it enough, it becomes a belief, right? And then that belief shapes our reaction to our feelings. I'm just going to get a little bit into brain science for a second. Your brain is only ever in one of two modes. It's either executive mode or survival mode. Survival mode is when you're operating from your amygdala firing. You're operating in fear. It was very helpful when we were cave people and saber-toothed tigers were coming at us. The problem is we've not been able to upgrade the equipment for life in 2023. And so we interpret things that happen to us from a fear state. We interpret it as if it's a threat. And what happens when something appears as a threat is you either fight, flight, or freeze. Now, the issue is that a lot of us, the fight mechanism is like, we just grind harder. We just work 100 hours a week. And that isn't a recipe for burnout. Or we flee, right? We just avoid the whole thing, right? We do other stuff, especially if we come up through program, we micromanage our program staff instead of actually focusing on fundraising. We flee. We're procrastinating and we're sitting and watching Netflix. We know we got a whole bunch of donors that we need to call, right? All of these types of reactions come from a place of fear, of not knowing what to do. Now, let's talk about money mindset. Many of us have been raised, not all of us, and those of you who haven't, kudos to you, but a lot of us, myself included, have been raised in a scarcity mindset. When I was growing up, I always heard things like, money doesn't grow on trees. Who do you think we are, the Rockefellers? Oh, that's for rich people, not for us. The message I received as a child was, money is scarce and we're never going to have enough of it. And somehow rich people are different than us. And I talk a lot about this one moment that happened when I was 8 years old. I grew up in San Francisco. And then as now, there are lots of unhoused people who live on the streets. And I gave a quarter to this man. And my dad turned around and he saw me and he goes, oh, so you're so rich now you can just give money away? Because in my family, and
wow,
my grandparents are Chinese immigrants, right? They showed up with $20 in their pockets. In my family, money meant survival. Money meant stability. And so
Yeah.
psychologically, in my father's head, when I was giving away money, I was giving away my family's security. I'm 8 years old, so of course I accepted that's true. When I started to fundraise in New York City, I carried that story with me of I hate asking people for money because subconsciously I'm believing that I'm asking them to give of their stability, security, and to experience the shame
Mm,
that I experienced when I was in trouble for giving money. And it really wasn't until I started to unpack wait a second. What if this is just a story that I'm telling myself? What if other people don't have the same story? What if there are some people in this world who love to give money? And by the way, what if it's true that it's not a zero
yeah.
sum game, right? Just because I'm wealthy
Right.
doesn't take anything away from you being wealthy. Like it's the pie is infinite. And that,
One thing that I want to just jump in, and that was a really powerful story. Thank you for sharing that. As a sector, if you zoom out, the stories we collectively tell ourselves about what it means to work in a nonprofit, what it means be, to do social impact work, that somehow fuel a lot of the narratives you're talking about, that money and power are the same. And that if you look historically at how nonprofits were fueled, and we're talking about funding your strategic vision, where that funding came from, this idea that needy people go to wealthy people. The wealthy people are the ones with the power and ask them to, just of their own largesse, give money for no reason, right?
mhm,
Because they are wealthy. And if that's our narrative, right, we have these personal narratives, these personal stories that we each carry. Everybody has one, even if we haven't excavated what they are, we all do. And then we map those onto these sector wide narratives and stories about who has power and who gets to be philanthropic and what it means to ask for money. There's this double layer, at the least,
mm,
of stories that don't serve us. And
yeah.
think about what it means for when you show up in a conversation with a major donor or a funder. How many conversations you and I have had with the folks that we coach where they're going in this disempowered stance. They're going into these conversations thinking, how can I convince this person who has
Mm.
saying that we need to give it to us? What do you see in your work? You talk to so many leaders around fundraising over the course of years? What are the implications of the often disempowering narratives that we have about money for our work as fundraisers?
Yeah. A couple of things that happen. When we're operating from that place of fear and scarcity, what's actually happening in our bodies is our adrenaline levels are going, our cortisol levels are high. That's when we experience burnout. We don't sleep well, we don't eat well, or we overeat. We're not taking care of ourselves. And so, of course, like it doesn't feel good to be in that fear place because back in the caveman days, like if there was a saber-toothed tiger coming at you, it would happen in an instant, then it would be over and you could recalibrate and rebalance. That rebalancing doesn't happen because we're constantly feeling like we're under attack, right? Part of it is self regulation and getting to the place of letting your prefrontal cortex take over and realizing that you don't have to continuously react to a situation. The other thing is, I would say, as leaders, we have to realize that we are bringing value to the table, right? And it's value for value. When you are operating from that place of fear, you get real transactional. You look at people like they're walking checkbooks. You say things like, we're just going to twist some arms. We're going to beg for money. I'm like, no, first of all, that's not what we do. And secondly,
That's right.
really does not accurately convey the change that you're making in the world, right? And so one of
Right.
my
Right.
mentors, Jennifer McCrae, says this: go in it for an ask, always on your feet, never on your knees. You're never on your
I
knees.
love that. Yeah.
If you actually think of yourself as a fundraiser, like, hey, I'm just throwing a party and I just want to see who's invited. Have you ever been offended by being invited to a party, Brooke?
Not once in my life. No.
No, you don't go to every party,
No.
but you're not like, how dare they invite me to this party? Similarly, with your funders, not everyone is going to fund you, but nobody is going to be offended by being invited if you ask the right way. And
That's
you
right.
are as a fundraiser, I just think it's such a cool job because you get to be the multiplier. You are the vessel through which people
Yes.
come together as a community. They bring their resources, whether it's time, network, energy, money. We need all the things at the table. And it's like stone
That's
soup.
right.
Everyone brings their own little thing and you just make a party happen. And so when we can approach fundraising without the emotional baggage, without the dread and the shame and the fear and the perception that I have of rich people and the things that they did to get their money. And instead, we're like, hey,
That's right.
we're trying to do this thing and we're looking for partners who want to do this thing with us. It just becomes lighter.
That's right. And you're getting at something that I know we go really deep into inside the program, the Fund Your Strategic Vision program, which is that how we think about fundraising, the messages, the language we use, who we approach is one part of a much bigger pie when we're talking about actually getting investments, right? That the money is part of it, but the vision is part of it, right? Painting a really compelling picture of the cathedral that people are helping to build, right? These are
That's
bricks
right.
that are being laid and there's a cathedral being built. And part of what you bring to the table is, hey, you get to be part of this incredible cathedral that is being built. Look at the vision for
Mm-hmm.
impact. Look at the way that we're changing the world. That's partly you. You're on that journey, right? That is very exciting to the
Mm-hmm.
right donors. And we talk in the program about how you find the right donors, painting a picture of the impact you're having. Look at what's happening because of the investment that you've made, because of the money that you've given. You're changing the world. People love that, right? When it is a change they want to see.
Yeah, they love that. And the other thing that I think people get really hung up on is that they focus so much on the people who don't give. Stop watering the
That's right.
weeds, water the flowers,
Yeah.
right? Instead, look at the people who love you, who show up for you, who come to your events, who donate every time you ask. Nurture that audience. Stop fixating on the people who don't give. It's almost like I love a dating analogy as it's like when I was dating, I've been married for a long time now, but like, why fixate on the person who didn't want to take you on a date? Why not build something with the person who did?
See, I love that analogy because it goes right back to where you started, which is the narratives we tell ourselves. When I was a baby ED, when I was growing my organization, I was afraid it was my vision that I was trying to bring to fruition. And every single person, especially in those early years, who said no, who couldn't see my vision, who didn't want to donate to the vision, who didn't want to join the board, who said no to anything, tapped right into that narrative, that fear, as you talked about. Wait a minute, maybe this thing that I'm building, maybe this cathedral isn't that beautiful, right? Maybe this
Mm,
impact isn't that important. Maybe I don't have what it takes to do this. If I couldn't convince this person who I thought would be a great donor, then there's something missing here.
mm,
And that narrative, right? That narrative has protected us over the years, right? That fear response has kept us safe. And so that's what we are. It's easier to lean into that and to listen to that. And part of what I hear you saying is mastering your money mindset is recognizing when that's happening,
yep.
recognizing what our narratives are, and developing strategies for letting go and being like, oh, that's not actually real. Just because my brain's telling me it's real doesn't mean it is.
Yeah. Look, whether we're talking about leadership or money mindset or any kind of other mindsets, the thing that you always have to remember is you get to choose your thoughts. And your thoughts then influence your feelings, which influence your actions, which influence your results. If you're free to choose whatever thoughts you want. If you choose to both have and hold on to thoughts that don't serve you and make you feel bad, like vaya con Dios, it's not up to like you're allowed to. But
Yeah.
on this
Yeah.
very, very brief time on this planet, I actually prefer to
Yeah.
choose thoughts that are going to help me, that choose thoughts that make me
Yeah.
feel good. And like the thought that everyone hates me and no one wants to fund me is not like an empowering thought that personally I would want to have. But you know what? Everyone's welcome to their own party, right?
It's a
Hey,
journey. It's a process.
some people are really into that hair shirt. Like, far be it from me. If you want to, pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Don't suffer if you don't have to.
I love it. I have to tell you, my entire experience as an executive director, nope, back up. My entire experience as an adult has been a process of learning how to retrain my brain not to
Hmm.
suffer unnecessarily.
Yeah.
Catching when I'm doing that. And when you and I have talked a lot about, even just in building our own businesses, those narratives can be sneaky, right? It's not
Oh
always
yeah.
obvious
Oh yeah.
how wrong they are. And this is not necessarily it's a mindset thing. It's more like a strategy, which we'll talk about more in the leadership piece. But one of the most powerful tools I have had in my, I don't want to say arsenal because that sounds really violent. Like one of the most powerful arrows in my quill has been you, has
Oh,
been
that's so
when I was an
sweet.
executive.
Hmm.
When I was an executive director, the listeners have heard me talk about my sustainable sisterhood, have been those peers and those partners, the accountability partners, the co-goal setters who are on the journey with me and can say, wait a minute, Brooke. I mean, when we talk about leadership mindset, I'm going to talk about hiring. How long did it take me to make my first hire in my business? Like a year. And a lot of that was you saying, but what you're telling yourself about delegation, what you're telling yourself about you have to hold on to about getting out of the weeds isn't accurate. It's not going to serve you. And having that, having that person or having those people, I will just lift up as a strategy for those of you listening that sometimes, not sometimes, all the time, it is good to have those partners on the journey with you because sometimes they're the only ones that are going to be able to pierce through the veil of the very loud mindset gremlins that scream in your ear the wrong shit.
Yeah. No, I'm very good at being like, no, that's bullshit.
That's
That is
right.
bullshit.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about
Yes.
leadership mindset because that is also critically important. So, alongside the money
Awesome.
piece, what is leadership mindset, Brooke?
Leadership mindset is a little bit tougher to describe than money mindset because it really is baked into everything that we do as leaders. What I will say, and the way I talk about leadership mindset and the way we talk about it in our program, is that there is a qualitative shift, and you referenced this a little bit earlier, in how we have to understand our role as leaders in our organizations if we want to grow the organization without burning out. We cannot just do more work. We have to recognize that our organization is becoming a different organism and we have to become different too. And there are mindset shifts, there are beliefs, there are narratives, there are understandings of our roles that have to shift. Those beliefs and narratives about what it means to be a leader, an effective leader, is what I mean by leadership mindset.
Yeah, I love it. And I always think about that Marshall Goldsmith quote of what you got you here won't get you there. And
Yes.
when we think about the shifts that we need to make as leaders in a growing organization, what are some of the levers that
Mhm.
we should be thinking about?
The biggest one is letting go of the hustle mentality. I talk about this all the time in my accelerator program that, and again, starting from personal experience, when I was growing my organization in those first early years, I took a lot of pride in making it work, right? Taking a very little bit of money, a very small staff. I used to say we're small but mighty. And I was so proud of that, that securing the resources to fund our actual vision, that wasn't even a narrative. That wasn't my language. My language was, I can make it work with anything. I would say that to funders, right? If you give us this $25,000, which by the way was almost never what it actually cost to run the program or do the work, look at how amazing I can be with that. That's about grinding harder, right? That's about working harder, not working smarter. And so the first really foundational shift is you got to let go of that. You got to take pride in a different thing, a totally different thing. And the thing to take pride in as a leader of a growing organization is that you've secured the resources that you actually need to do the work for what it costs, right? When you actually look at your strategic vision, there's a cost to that vision. Raising the money, bringing in the resources to fully cover the full cost of your vision, that's something to be really proud of. It's hard, it's scary, but when you shift your mindset to, no, that's the goal, not making do with what we have, which keeps you small, but looking out and saying, I can do this. I can rally the troops. I can find the resources, tapping into abundance mindset. The resources are out there. And part of my job as a leader is to find them, to steward them, and to aim them at the true cost of my vision.
What I hear you saying too, which is so powerful, is that you have to upgrade your vision of yourself, right? And being the
Yes.
kind of person that runs a multi-million dollar org, or being the kind of person who can have
Yes.
a 10 or 20 or 30-person staff, right? Like the vision of
Yes.
self and who I am and what I'm capable of has to start with you.
Yes. Yes. That's exactly right. You talked about what got you here won't get you there. I have entire trainings with that title because it's so true. One of the underlying shifts in understanding that has to happen as we talk about leadership mindset is that $1 million organization, let's say, is not actually just a $500,000 organization that has more money in the bank. It's not just a $500,000 organization with more staff. It's a qualitatively different entity. It's a different organism. Its relationships look different. When you sit down with major donors, what they're looking to see and how they are expecting your infrastructure to be set up and your impact to be carried out, the systems they're expecting you to have in place, those are just different at $1 million, just as one inflection point. And so you're exactly right, Rhea. What I am saying is that you have to be a different leader. The second shift, which is related to something you referenced, is about leverage, right? You talked about 10x, not 2x work or 10x effort, right? 10x impact. If you think about the work that you do on a day-to-day basis or week-to-week basis as a leader, as X, right? Just work that has to happen. 10x work is work that where the return on investment of that effort is outsized, right? You put in an hour and you get back $50,000 in a gift from a major donor. You get back board members who are out in the world as cheerleaders and ambassadors, attracting and bringing in new people without you actually having to do that work. So I would say is really most important about this leadership mindset piece is that qualitative difference and then the leverage, really understanding the leverage point.
Yeah. Two things that are like just sitting on my heart right now is the word courageous. Like, in order
Oh,
to
yeah.
grow as a leader, you have to be courageous and step into stuff you've never done
Yeah.
before. Step
Yeah.
into the stuff that makes you uncomfortable, right? And
Yes.
then
Yes.
the other piece is to be brutally honest with yourself about the 80-20. Like, what is actually the 20% of stuff that you're doing that is creating 80% of the outcome? And
Yeah.
can you focus on that and let go of all of the other 80%? Like, I have an example in my book where I talk about how, like, I couldn't let go of ordering pizza because it just was more complicated to write down the thing versus just ordering the pizza. But it's a stupid example, but I was like, why can't
Yeah.
I let go of ordering the pizza? Part of it was like, I was uncomfortable trusting someone else to do this thing.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
also,
I
I was
think
uncomfortable, like, doing that because I knew how to do that versus doing something else that I didn't know how to do and thought might screw up.
that's right. I love the courageous and the mindset piece here, right? To use an example of sort of tactics versus mindset. You and I both talk with leaders a lot about time management. Everyone wants sort of tips for time management, productivity management, right? How can I clear my calendar? How can I have more time for the things that I know I should be doing? One approach to that is to do a calendar audit, to delegate to your team, right? That's a big thing we talk about. Delegation is important. Those are tactics. Those are things you can do to shift things around in your calendar. I talk a lot about energy mapping, right? Paying attention to what should be where. Those are really good and important. But underlying the tactics is a mindset shift that has to happen, or the tactics will continue to fail. And the mindset shift is delegation, letting go, stepping into high leverage responsibilities. That is my job. My job is not the tasks. It may have been when I started the organization. It may have been a year ago when the organization was a different entity. But my job as a leader is to delegate. My job as a leader is to figure out how things should get done. What is the staff that we need so that I have people to delegate to? What are the meetings that shouldn't happen so that my time and my workflows are efficient and effective? Your job is not to do the work. Your job is to see that the work gets done. And when you make that mental shift, things like delegating, things like stepping into with courage and bravery, letting go of things that you used to own becomes, I won't necessarily say easier, right? There's still like some mental blocks there, but you start to understand that if you don't, your organization won't grow, right? The mindset piece and the tactics are different because the tactics require you to understand I'm not just building the skill of delegation. It's not enough to have a coach tell me what I should or shouldn't let go and take off my calendar. I have to believe and understand that is the definition of what I ought to be doing. If I don't let it go, I'm not doing my job. If I don't
That's right.
delegate, I'm not doing my job.
Yeah. And when I'm sure one last thing before we round the corner on closing this up. But so this guy, Matt Mullenweg, who runs WordPress, did something which I found incredible. He literally went into his company calendar, like everyone's calendar, and he canceled all the meetings. And he was like, I've canceled all meetings. Now, if there are meetings that you want back on the calendar, like you are welcome to do that. But all of these meetings are actually a waste of time and productivity.
I love that. One of the tasks that are challenges that I give folks in my accelerator is take a week, cancel all your meetings, and rebuild just as a thought experiment. Rebuild where you are holding only the things that you ought to be holding in this new role as a leader, where you're holding the high leverage, where you're delegating, and then look for the gaps, right? People realizes, oh, I need a team member here or this person. Like it starts to, if the forcing function is, no, you hold the things you're supposed to be holding, right? You are doing high leverage work. You are doing the visioning work and the strategy work and the partnership work. If that is fixed, then it's really clear what needs to be shored up inside your organization without you taking it on. Whether or not you're able to do that is where the bravery and the courage and the sort of mindset shift comes in. But it helps to be clear what shifts you're supposed to be making.
And I would just say, to round it back to the Fundraising strategic vision, it's really hard to do this without a coach. It's really hard to do this without a separate entity holding you accountable. Right. And I just think it's so ridiculous. Like, we don't ask Serena Williams to go on court without a coach. We don't ask LeBron James to play without a coach. Like, why are we asking leaders to play on this playing field of running an organization without coaches? We all need a coach. All right.
Coaches. Let's just go out, Google stuff, find stuff.
Yeah, folks, we are recruiting for Fund Your Strategic Vision right now. This sounds like something that you need more of in your life, which honestly, who can't use more Brooke and Rhea in their lives?
You do. You need it.
You do. Yeah. We created a little quiz for you. We call it a pie, personal, internal, and external changes that you need to make to grow your organization. And we'd love for you to take the quiz. Talk to us. Let us know if you want to get into this group coaching program, because we're going to help you grow without the pain. We will put the link in the show notes for you. Give it a whirl. It'll be fun.
Awesome. It is always so much fun talking to you, Rhea. And we will be back next week, listeners, with part 2. Rhea talked about the pie personal we talked about today. Next week, we're going to share some secrets about what the inside of your organization really needs to look like if you want to fund your strategic vision, if you want to grow, get unstuck, stay unstuck, raise millions of dollars without burning out.
You always talk about building the engine. So we're going to pop that hood and look at that engine that you need to build in order to grow. We'll talk to you next week.
See you next week.
Bye.